Welcome back to the show. Today, we are turning the lens inward. We spend a massive amount of time utilizing this specific medium to deliver information, to explore complex topics, and, well, to connect with you.
We do.
We pour hours into research, recording, and editing, all to ship an audio file directly into your ears. But rarely do we stop to look at the medium itself.
Right.
I am talking, of course, about the very format you are listening to right now. It is everywhere today. I mean, you have millions of active shows, you have billion-dollar licensing deals involving major celebrities, and you have a format that has fundamentally changed how the world consumes audio. It has, for many people, completely replaced the radio.
For a huge segment of the population, yes.
But the story of how we got here is not a straight line. It is not just a story of Apple or Spotify deciding to make a product. It is actually a really complex biography involving, believe it or not, Russian tapes, some incredibly clunky computer code, and some very specific moments of invention that almost didn't happen.
It is a fascinating history, and it's so often misunderstood. We tend to think of this industry as a strictly modern phenomenon, maybe starting with the launch of the smartphone or the iPod.
Yeah, that's the common perception.
We see it as a product of the mobile internet era. But the roots actually stretch back much further, specifically to the 1980s. The journey to the sleek, on-demand audio we have today involves a lineage that includes Russian samizdat distributed on magnetic tape,
Which is just incredible to think about.
early internet infrastructure that could barely handle audio files without crashing, and a very specific evolution in computer code that went completely unnoticed by the masses for years. It was a long road of technical problem solving before it became the cultural force we recognize now.
That is exactly what we are going to trace today. We're going to build the comprehensive biography of this medium. We will map out the precursors, the invention of the enclosure, which is a term we are going to have to spend some real time unpacking because it is, the DNA of the whole industry.
It is the absolute core of it.
Then we'll cover the accidental naming of the medium, the massive iTunes moment that changed the user experience, and finally the modern explosion of content and monetization. It is a complex narrative, so let's start at the very beginning.
Okay.
And, the very beginning, even before the internet, was the distribution method. You mentioned the 1980s and Russian tapes. This sounds more like a spy novel than a tech story.
It does sound unlikely, doesn't it?
Mm.
But if we are looking for the conceptual ancestor of what we do, we have to look at the illusion of independent radio. This was a project started in 1989.
1989. Okay, so we are pre-World Wide Web here. The Berlin Wall is crumbling, the world is in flux, but we certainly aren't streaming audio on our phones.
No, not even close. This was a Russian samizdat program created in Rostov-on-Don.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, they did not have an RSS feed, a server, or even a website. The format was entirely physical.
Right.
They distributed this radio program via magnetic tape and cassettes.
So when you say distributed, you mean literally handing a physical object to another person, a cassette tape.
Precisely. It was circulated hand-to-hand or sometimes via mail. It is important to understand the context of the Soviet Union at this time. Broadcasting was completely state-controlled.
Of course.
There was no open frequency for independent thought. So these creators recorded their thoughts, their journalism, their music onto cassettes and passed them around.
That's an incredible level of dedication to the format. To record something, duplicate it onto a physical tape, and then physically move it to the listener. That is the definition of high friction.
It is, but it established the core relationship. It is considered the first Soviet-Russian prototype of what would become our industry. The core idea was there. Asynchronous, independent audio content distributed to a niche audience outside of state-controlled broadcasting.
Bypassing the gatekeepers.
Exactly. They were bypassing the gatekeepers using the only technology that was available to them.
That concept of asynchronous is key. Radio, by definition, is synchronous. You have to tune in at 5:00 p.m. to hear the news. If you miss it, it's
gone.
forever.
It's gone forever.
These tapes allowed you to listen whenever you wanted. So the spirit of the medium existed before the technology did. But let's shift to the technology. As we move into the 1990s and the early internet, distributing audio was not easy. It was actually a nightmare.
It was incredibly difficult. Bandwidth was extremely narrow. Storage was expensive. In the 1980s, you had companies like RCS or radio computing services, which provided digital music and talk software to radio stations. But that was all for internal industry use.
B2B software, not for the consumer.
Right. It wasn't something for the general public. When the internet started to open up, you had things like the M-bone or multicast backbone.
The multicast backbone. That sounds like something from a sci-fi movie.
It almost was. It was a virtual network built on top of the internet, specifically to carry IP multicast traffic. It was used primarily by educational and research institutes to distribute audio and video.
So not for the average person with a dial-up modem.
Absolutely not. It required specialized hardware and significant technical knowledge. It was not consumer-friendly in the slightest. You couldn't just open a browser and click play.
But then we get a major figure in this history who tried to bridge that gap, Carl Malamud.
Carl Malamud is a pivotal figure. He launched Internet Talk Radio in 1993. This is a critical milestone. It was effectively the first computer radio talk show.
What kind of content was it?
The content consisted of interviews with computer experts, discussing the emerging technology of the time.
And how were people listening to Internet Talk Radio in 1993? I assume they weren't streaming it, given the modem speeds of the day.
No, streaming was not a viable option for most. Users had to fetch the audio files one by one. You'd identify the file you wanted, initiate a download, and then wait.
And wait, and wait.
And wait. Depending on your connection speed, a 30-minute interview could easily take an hour or more to download. Once it was finally on your hard drive, only then could you play it.
That is a lot of friction. You really had to want to hear that interview. But despite that friction, the behavior was being formed.
Exactly. Despite the technical hurdles, the concept was revolutionary. In fact, a 1993 episode of the TV show The Computer Chronicles described this project as asynchronous radio.
Asynchronous radio, there's that phrase again, that defines the entire shift.
It is the defining characteristic. Malamud explicitly noted that listeners could pause the audio, restart it, or skip content they did not like. That control over the listening experience is what separates this medium from traditional broadcasting.
Right. In broadcast, the producer controls the time. Here, the listener controls the time.
That's the perfect way to put it.
So the behavior was established in 1993. We also saw other attempts around this time. There was the Dan and Scott Show on AOL in 1996, and Radio USAC in Chile in 1998 was exploring on-demand streaming, but there was still a massive hardware gap.
A huge gap.
You could download the file, sure, but then you were tethered to your desk. You were sitting in a computer chair listening to a talk show. How were people trying to solve the portability issue?
That brings us to Compaq Research around 1999 and 2000. They developed something called the Pocket DJ. It was a portable player and music download system intended for a device called the personal jukebox.
The personal jukebox. This was pre-iPod, of course.
Oh, yes. This was developed completely independently of the software protocols we use today, but it was trying to solve the exact same problem: getting digital audio off the computer and into a portable device.
So what happened to it?
It failed to launch as a widespread service, but it shows that the idea was in the ether. Engineers at Compaq knew that people wanted to take their audio with them.
It is fascinating to see these parallel inventions. It seems like the idea was inevitable. Everyone knew they wanted portable, downloadable audio, but the pieces just hadn't quite clicked together yet into a seamless ecosystem.
Not yet.
This brings us to section 2 of our timeline, the false start and the technical breakthrough. We are looking at the years 2000 and 2001. There was a company called i2go that seemed to have the right idea.
i2go is a classic example of being slightly too early to the market. In September 2000, they launched a system that enabled the automatic downloading of episodic audio news and sports to PCs and their portable devices.
What were those called?
They had a service called myaudio2go.com and a proprietary player called the Ego.
That sounds exactly like what we do today. You subscribe, it downloads, you listen on a device. Why isn't i2go the name we all remember?
Functionally, it was very similar. The software could be programmed to automatically download the latest episodic content. However, they were trying to build a completely proprietary ecosystem during a very volatile economic time.
Ah, the dot-com bubble.
Precisely. The service only lasted a little over a year. It folded due to the dot-com crash and a complete lack of capital. Investors pulled back, and the company simply couldn't sustain the infrastructure costs.
So the proprietary business model failed. It was a walled garden that ran out of money. But while i2go was collapsing, the actual technical foundation of the medium was being built in the open, using open source code.
That's right.
This is the RSS connection. I want to really unpack this because RSS is one of those acronyms people hear, but might not really understand the history or the function of. What exactly happened here?
So RSS stands for Really Simple Syndication. It is a web feed that allows users and applications to access updates to websites in a standardized computer-readable format.
So it's for text, mostly. Headlines.
At the time, yes, it was mostly used for text headlines, letting you know a new blog post was up.
Mm-hmm.
But in October 2000, a man named Tristan Louis proposed a draft concept of attaching sound and video files to these RSS feeds. He basically suggested, what if we could attach a media file to that notification?
Like attaching a file to an email, but for a website feed. And this proposal was picked up by a key figure, Dave Weiner.
Dave Weiner is a software developer and the author of the RSS format. He took Louis's idea and decided to implement it. At the same time, Adam Curry, a former MTV VJ who is often called the Podfather, was discussing this audio blogging concept with Weiner.
Curry, right.
Curry wanted a way to move large media files automatically. He didn't want to just click download. He wanted the files to arrive on his computer while he slept.
The subscription model. And this collaboration led to the invention of the enclosure.
Correct. Weiner released a new version, RSS 0.92. In this update, he defined a new element called enclosure. In technical terms, this simply passed the address of a media file to an aggregator.
So it's just a little piece of code.
That's all it is. It tells the software, hey, there's a file attached to this post, and here's where it is located on the server, and here's how big it is.
It sounds so simple, but that one line of code changed everything. It transformed the internet from a library where you have to go find the book to a delivery service where the book shows up at your door.
Yeah, excellent analogy.
So when was this actually tested? When was the first enclosure sent out into the world?
That was on January 11, 2001. Dave Weiner demonstrated the feature by enclosing a Grateful Dead song in his scripting news weblog.
A Grateful Dead song. That is a perfect piece of trivia. Of all the audio in the world, the first payload of this new technology was the Grateful Dead. So the technology exists in January 2001. Did it explode immediately?
Not at all. Adoption was very slow for the first 2 years. You have to remember, this was just a capability in the code. It didn't mean anyone was using it.
Right, you needed software for it.
You need two sides of the equation, a sender and a receiver. You needed software to create the feed with the enclosure, and you needed a player or aggregator that knew what to do with that enclosure tag. Weiner's company, Userland, eventually integrated both. But it was a niche tool for developers and tech enthusiasts.
So for a couple of years, this powerful tool is just sitting there. That brings us to 2003. This seems to be the year where things start to coalesce. We see the development of something called Ed Radio.
Yes, in June 2003, Stephen Downes demonstrated audio aggregation with an application called Ed Radio. What it did was scan RSS feeds, specifically for MP3s, and then collect them into a single feed. This was a dedicated aggregator.
Okay, so it was proof that you could pull audio from different sources into one place.
Exactly.
I want to make a distinction here because I think it confuses people. We've talked about downloadable audio and what we do now. What is the fundamental difference? For example, the New England Patriots had a show called PFW in Progress starting way back in 2000. People could download it. Why wasn't that the start?
That is a key distinction. PFW in Progress was a recorded live show available for download. You could go to the website, find the file, and click a link to get it. But it was not automated via RSS until 2005.
So it was manual.
A true show in this medium requires that automation, the subscription aspect, where the file comes to you without you taking action for every single episode. The difference is pull versus push. Downloading is pulling. Subscription is content being pushed to you.
Right. It is the difference between going to the newsstand every morning to buy a paper versus having the paper thrown on your driveway.
Perfect way to describe it.
So who was creating the first true content using this automation?
For that, we have to look at Christopher Lydon. He was a former reporter for the New York Times and an NPR host.
A traditional media guy.
Yes, from a very traditional background. He had developed a portable recording studio and was conducting these in-depth interviews with bloggers and futurists. He had the content, but he needed the distribution method.
And Dave Weiner was involved here too, I assume.
Yes. In September 2003, Weiner created a special RSS feed for Lydon's blog. He took about 25 of those accumulated interviews and released them through this new feed with enclosures.
So a batch drop of content.
It was a proof of concept. It showed that you could deliver a serialized show this way, and this challenged other developers to support the format. It created a demand for the tools.
And the software development ramped up quickly after that.
It did. Once developers saw it working in the wild, they jumped in. You had Pete Perdole, who adapted an existing aggregator called Amphidesk to display these enclosure links. And then Doug Kay, who ran a show called IT Conversations, created an RSS feed with enclosures.
And his is often cited as the first.
Doug Kay's feed is often cited as the first true series in the sense of a regular ongoing show using the technology from the very start.
And then, in October 2003, all these minds came together at a conference.
BloggerCon. This was a pivotal moment. It brought all the key developers into the same room. Kevin Marks demonstrated a script that could download RSS enclosures and then transfer them directly to iTunes and then to an iPod.
That's the missing link.
It was the missing link, getting the file from the computer to the device automatically. Adam Curry and Kevin Marks began collaborating right there. It was the moment the loop was finally closed, from the server to the RSS feed to the computer to the iPod.
That sets the stage for 2004.
Yeah.
We have the tech, we have the early adopters, we have the content starting to flow, but we didn't have a name. We were calling it audio blogging or online radio or guerrilla media. Where did the word we use today actually come from?
Yeah, it came from a journalist who was just trying to fill space in an article. Ben Hammersley was writing for The Guardian in February 2004.
The Guardian, okay.
He was discussing this new trend and suggesting potential names for this nascent technology. He threw out podcasting as a suggestion, combining iPod and broadcasting.
It is funny to think it was just a suggestion in a newspaper article. It wasn't a marketing team meeting or a focus group, just a writer playing with words.
And it took a little while to stick. 7 months later, a user named Danny Gregoire used the term to describe the automatic download process. Then Dave Slusher used it in his show, Evil Genius Chronicles, in September of 2004.
And how did he use it?
Slusher used it in the broadcasting sense.
Yeah.
I am podcasting to you. That usage cemented it as both a verb and a noun.
And we can actually track the adoption of this word. We can see it spreading like a virus through the early internet.
We can. Doc Searles, a technology columnist, began tracking Google hits for the word. On September 28, 2004, there were only 24 results for the word on the entire internet.
24. That is basically zero in internet terms. That is a typo, not a trend.
But look at the growth. By October 4, just a few days later, there were 2,750 hits. By October 18, 2004, there were over 100,000 hits.
Wow.
The term went viral before we really used the term viral in the social media sense. The community needed a name, and this was the one that stuck.
That is exponential growth. And with that growth came a software war. You had different groups trying to build the best receiver or podcatcher, as they were called.
The first client with a proper graphic user interface, or GUI, was called iPodder-X. It was developed by August Trometer and Ray Slakinski.
And that was a big deal.
It was huge. Before this, a lot of the tools were command line based, which terrified average users.
Yeah.
iPodder-X made it visual and user-friendly. Click a button, get the show.
But there was also a competing group, and this is where we see the first major legal conflict in the space.
A group called iSpider rebranded their software as iPodder. They released it as free software under the GPL license. However, Apple was watching.
Of course they were.
Apple sent a cease and desist letter regarding the use of the iPod trademark in the name iPodder.
Apple protecting its brand. This must have been terrifying for these developers. They are just coding for fun in their spare time, and suddenly the biggest tech company in the world is threatening legal action.
It was a wake-up call that this was becoming a real industry with real stakes. Apple argued that the name caused brand confusion, so the software was renamed Juice.
Loose. I remember that.
But this era also saw the professionalization of the back end. In November 2004, Libsyn, or Liberated Syndication, launched. This was the first true service provider offering storage and RSS tools specifically for creators.
So you didn't need to be a tech wizard anymore.
Exactly. It meant you didn't have to be a server expert to host a show. You just paid a fee, you uploaded your file, and they handled the RSS and the bandwidth.
That brings us to 2005. If 2004 was the year of the geeks and the early adopters, 2005 was the year the medium went mainstream. And the biggest driver of that was Apple officially entering the game.
This is the tipping point. In June 2005, Apple released iTunes 4.9. This update integrated subscription, downloading, and organization directly into the music software that millions and millions of people were already using to manage their iPods.
I remember this vividly. Suddenly, there was just a new tab in iTunes. You didn't need third-party scripts, you didn't need Juice or iPodder-X, it was just there.
Exactly. It completely removed the technical barrier for the average user. They launched the directory with about 3,000 entries. Within just 2 days, Apple reported 1 million subscriptions.
1 million in 2 days. That is the power of platform integration. It took years to get to the first few thousand listeners, and then 48 hours to get to 1 million once Apple flipped the switch.
That's astonishing.
And the culture recognized this shift immediately.
The new Oxford American Dictionary named podcast the word of the year in 2005. It signaled that this had moved from a tech niche to a general consumer behavior. It was now a word that your parents might know.
We also saw high-profile figures jumping in. It wasn't just tech bloggers anymore.
In July 2005, U.S. President George W. Bush added RSS feeds to his weekly radio addresses. That is a significant validation of the format. When the White House adopts a technology, it is no longer fringe.
And the big media companies followed.
Traditional media also moved in. The BBC began releasing shows like In Our Time as downloadable files. They saw the writing on the wall.
I want to highlight a specific show from 2005 that helped change the perception of what the content could be, a show called Eat Feed.
Eat Feed, yes. Hosted by Anne Bramley. This show won the first Podcast of the Year award at the Portable Media Expo.
And what made it so significant?
What made it significant was the quality. Bramley brought academic rigor, she was a PhD student, and tight editing to the medium. Before this, a lot of shows were, frankly, unedited banter, just two people talking into a mic for an hour.
Right.
Eat Feed was scripted, it was polished, it was produced. It showed that this could be a serious production akin to a documentary or a high-end radio show.
Moving into the next phase then, let's call it Section 6, Expansion Genres and Monetization. This covers the periods from roughly 2006 to 2013. We have to talk about Ricky Gervais.
The Ricky Gervais Show is crucial to the history of monetization. The first season was distributed freely and was a massive success. It broke all the download records at the time.
It was everywhere.
But for season 2, in 2006, they made a very controversial move. They moved to a paid model. It cost 95 pence per episode via Audible.
People were outraged at the time. I recall the forums just lighting up. Paying for this kind of content seemed antithetical to the open nature of the web. The expectation was that everything should be free.
It was a huge risk, but it worked. The show claimed over 300 million unique downloads by 2011. It proved that people would pay for high-quality, exclusive content. It validated the business model that Audible and other companies would later build their empires on.
Speaking of download numbers, there was a bit of a rivalry during this time regarding records. Everyone wanted to be the king of the medium.
Yes, Adam Carolla claimed a Guinness World Record in 2011 with 59.6 million downloads. However, looking back at the data, Gervais actually had higher numbers at that time.
So why the discrepancy?
It highlights how difficult it was, and still is, to get verified, standardized data in this industry. Because of the decentralized nature of RSS, counting listeners is much, much harder than counting views on a centralized platform like YouTube.
Around 2009, we saw the comedy boom. This is when the medium really became the primary home for comedians.
It was a perfect fit. Comedians could bypass network censors and time slots. They didn't need a TV executive to greenlight their ideas.
Total creative freedom.
And that's when you saw the launch of WTF with Marc Maron, The Joe Rogan Experience, and Comedy Bang, which was originally called Comedy Death Ray Radio. These shows built massive, loyal followings based on long-form, unscripted conversation. It allowed audiences to feel like they knew the comedians intimately.
But it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were serious legal battles. We have to mention the patent troll issue.
This is a complex and dark chapter. A company called Vela Media was awarded a patent for episodic media in 2009. The problem was they'd filed for it in 2003.
After the technology was already invented and in use?
Exactly. Dave Weiner publicly contested this. He pointed out that his invention and all the prior art of the medium predated their filing. It created a cloud of legal uncertainty over the industry for years.
People were afraid they'd get sued.
There were fears that creators would be sued for simply using the technology. It was a serious threat to the open nature of the entire ecosystem.
We also saw the format expanding into the physical world with live tours. It wasn't just in your headphones anymore.
Lance Anderson was a pioneer here. In 2006, he took the Lance Anderson podcast experiment on tour in Liverpool. It featured live music and video links.
What was the significance of that?
It showed that the digital connection could translate to ticket sales and live audiences. This paved the way for the massive live shows we see today, where shows sell out entire theaters.
And regarding content diversity, we should mention women's parliamentary radio.
Created in 2007 by Bonnie Sones, this was an important project that established an archive of interviews with female politicians. It demonstrated the archival value of the medium, preserving voices and perspectives that might be lost in the 24-hour news cycle.
So it could be a historical record.
It showed that this technology could be used for historical preservation and serious political discourse, not just entertainment.
Now we arrive at the modern era. Section 7, the serial era. 2014 is widely considered the moment the medium became a true mass media phenomenon.
It is hard to overstate the impact of Serial. Launched by the team from This American Life, it was a complete sensation.
The numbers were just staggering.
By the end of season 1, it had 68 million downloads. It was the first show of its kind to win a Peabody Award.
Why did Serial hit so hard? What was it about that show specifically that captured the public imagination?
It introduced the binge-worthy narrative format to audio. It was investigative journalism with a powerful hook. It popularized the true crime genre, which led to huge hits like My Favorite Murder and Case File.
But it was more than just the genre, wasn't it?
It was a production value. It sounded cinematic. It gave people something to talk about around the water cooler in a way that episodic interview shows really hadn't before. It was appointment listening. You had to hear the next episode.
And then in 2017, the New York Times changed the game again with The Daily.
The Daily brought the high production values of public radio to the speed of the daily news cycle. It launched in 2017 and featured original reporting from their newsroom.
It changed people's habits.
It completely changed people's morning routines. Instead of turning on the TV or the radio, they plugged in their headphones. It proved that a short daily news show could be habit-forming and incredibly profitable.
And then the money got really, really big. We have to talk about the Joe Rogan deal. This was the moment the industry shifted from an open ecosystem to a platform war.
In 2019, Joe Rogan signed a licensing deal with Spotify, reportedly worth over $100 million. At that time, Rogan claimed his show was getting 190 million downloads per month.
An unbelievable number.
This deal signaled that these shows were no longer just a side project or a promotional tool. They were prime media assets, comparable to television shows or film franchises. Spotify was willing to pay that money to make the content exclusive to their platform, challenging the open RSS nature of the history we've just traced.
I want to look at the global picture for a moment. We often focus on the U.S., but is the U.S. the biggest market for this medium?
In terms of total volume, yes, but in terms of per capita listening, South Korea is actually the world leader. As of 2019, 58% of the South Korean population listened monthly.
58%. That is a surprising statistic. In the USA, what was that figure?
In the USA, that figure was roughly 32% in the same year. It shows how deeply the medium has penetrated different cultures.
And the sheer volume of content now is staggering.
By 2021, there were over 44 million episodes and 1.7 million shows globally. The scale is just immense. It has become the default way for experts, comedians, and storytellers to reach an audience.
We are also seeing the definition blur with video. We call them vodcasts, though that term feels a bit dated now.
It does. This is Section 8 in our roadmap. Video's been around for a long time in this space. Dead End Days in 2003 is believed to be the first serialized video show. Then you had popular tech shows like Dignation and comedy like Never Not Funny in the mid-2000s.
But now with YouTube, it feels like everything is video.
YouTube has become a dominant listening platform. Many shows, like Rogan's, are filmed. It blurs the line between a vlog and a talk show.
So is it the same medium?
That's the debate. If you are watching two people talk for 3 hours on YouTube, is it the same as what we're doing now? The industry generally says yes, but the technical delivery is different. It is streaming video rather than an RSS audio enclosure.
We should also briefly touch on two other niche areas that were important early on: podnography and pod-safe music.
As with almost every new internet technology, adult content was an early adopter. Podnography was a term used to describe adult-themed shows. It helped drive early adoption of the technology among a certain user base.
And pod-safe music.
Pod-safe music emerged as a necessity. Creators couldn't afford to license Rolling Stones songs. The fees were astronomical. So a market for independent, royalty-free music developed specifically to serve creators in this space. It created a whole parallel music industry.
So we have gone from a Russian tape in 1989 to a billion-dollar industry today. It is quite a journey.
It is an incredible story.
Let's just summarize this trajectory. We started with physical tapes handed person to person. We moved to clunky computer downloads that took hours. We invented a piece of code called enclosure to automate the delivery. We argued about the name until a newspaper article just happened to settle it. Apple streamlined the experience for millions. Serial made it cinematic. And now it is a dominant global media format.
And what is really remarkable is that the underlying technology RSS remains largely the same. Despite the platforms and the massive amounts of money, the basic architecture of here is a file, come and get it, is still the foundation for the vast majority of shows out there.
It really is the democratization of radio.
That is the key insight. The barrier to entry used to be owning a transmission tower and a government license, which cost millions. Now the barrier is owning a decent microphone and a computer. This allowed niche topics, from veganism to specific retro video games, to find global audiences that broadcast radio simply couldn't serve.
It fragmented the monoculture.
But it empowered the individual voice.
It has been an incredible exploration. Thank you for walking us through this biography.
It was a pleasure to analyze the history.
And to you listening right now, hopefully this gives you a new appreciation for the technology bringing this voice into your ears. Thanks for listening.